Hello, welcome you to the online lecture series in political theory. In the last class, we have discussed the basic tenets of Marxist materialist conception of history, also known as historical materialism. I have discussed in detail the importance that Marxism assigns to production, explained two aspects of mode of production, that is, relations of production and forces of production, and the relations between these two. Then I clarified the kind of interactions that take place between the base and superstructure, and finally spoke about the role that Marxism assigns to human praxis in shaping human history. In this class, I will read out certain passages from Marx and Engels' works. These passages will help us to understand what exactly these doyens of modern socialism have to say in their works about human history. At the end, I will suggest some reading material that will help you to explore the subject further. So I start taking one quotation from Engels' work, Socialism, Utopian and Scientific. Here Engels says this: the materialist conception of history starts from the proposition that the production of means to support human life, and next to production, the exchange of things produced, is the basis of all social structure. That in every society that has appeared in history, the manner in which wealth is distributed and society divided into classes or orders is dependent on what is produced, how it is produced, and how the products are exchanged. From this point of view, the final causes of all social changes and political revolutions are to be sought not in men's brains, not in men's better insights into eternal truth and justice, but in changes in the modes of production and exchange. So, what is he saying in this passage? He is saying that if you have to understand human history, we have to start with this basic elementary question as to what is produced, how it is produced, and how it is exchanged. They are the crucial things: production and exchange. How it is done in the given society will determine all other aspects of human life. So human history, it doesn't depend on what greatest minds think. It starts with production. So if you want to understand any social movements or any political revolutions, you have to look at the foundations. The foundation lies in the mode of production and exchange. Now I will take up another passage from Karl Marx, The German Ideology. It was written in 1840s. At that time itself, he was already coming to this conclusion. He says, the first premise of all human history is, of course, the existence of living human individuals. Thus, the first fact to be established is the physical organization of these individuals and their subsequent relation to the rest of nature. Men can be distinguished from animals by consciousness, by religion, or anything else you like. They themselves begin to distinguish themselves from animals as soon as they begin to produce their means of subsistence. A step which is conditioned by their physical organization. By producing their means of subsistence, men are indirectly producing their actual material life. See these beautiful passages. As I was instructing you, whenever you want, you can pause the video, take a snapshot or write it down. These are the people who explained very complex things in a very concise language. In this para, Marx is telling what I have said, two aspects of mode of production. They say physical organization of individuals, how people come together in some form while involved in production. That we say relations of production. And their consequent relation to the rest of nature, how the human beings as a whole interact with the nature, that is forces of production. So this is the crucial point to understand history. As I also told, you can distinguish, men can distinguish from animals in so many ways. But the most important thing is the ability of human beings to produce material conditions for their existence. It is that actually which distinguish human beings from animals. So this production determines all other aspects of material life that the human beings create. Now I come to another quotation from Marx. It's a preface to a contribution to the critique of political economy. So this is what Marx writes. In the social production of their existence, men inevitably enter into definite relations which are independent of their will, namely relations of production appropriate to a given stage in the development of their material forces of production. The mode of production in material life determines the general character of a social, political, spiritual process of life. It is not the consciousness of men that determines their existence, but on the contrary, their social existence determines their social consciousness. In this passage, Marx is reiterating what he told in the German ideology about mode of production, relations of production, and forces of production. But there is certain points which I want you to take care. Where he is telling men inevitably enter into definite relations which are independent of their will. This is very interesting part. It is not that the people determine what they want to become. Whether you are a slave or a slave lord, whether you are an artisan or a serf or a landlord, whether you are a capitalist or a worker, it is not something determined by the people. I want to be slave, nobody says. So this is something that they find themselves in. You are a part of that. So this is not something that I want, so I create. You are already into that relations, either as capitalist or as a worker, as a landlord, as a serf. So this is one aspect which we need to keep in mind. So also the second part of this one, which says that the mode of production determines our social, political, spiritual processes. Sometimes we think that it is our consciousness that tells what should be and what should not be. Marx tells it is the reverse. It is your material existence, your social existence, which determines your social consciousness. Whether you think like a bourgeois or as a peasant or a serf, it depends on what you are basically. Your existence determines your consciousness, not vice versa. This is something which I want all the readers to understand. Now I'll read out another interesting passage. Actually, it is a part of the lecture that Engels delivered at the grave of Karl Marx on March 17, 1883. Marx expired on March 14, 1883. I read that when Marx expired, to this graveyard, there were only some 13 members who assembled. Such a great philosopher who influenced the whole world through his writings subsequently. When he died, there were hardly 12-13 members in this graveyard. So it was there that Engels made this observation about Marx. So this is what he told about Marx. Just as Darwin discovered the law of development or organic nature, so Marx discovered the law of development of human history. The simple fact, hitherto concealed by an overgrowth of ideology, that mankind must first of all eat, drink, have shelter and clothing before it can pursue politics, science, art, religion, etc. That therefore the production of the immediate material means form the foundation upon which the state institutions, the legal conceptions, art, and even the ideas on religion of the people concerned have been evolved, and in the light of which they must therefore be explained instead of vice versa, as had hitherto been the case. See, in this passage, Engels is telling that Marx is like Darwin. Darwin gave this theory of evolution of the species, and Marx found out the law of development of human society. What is that greatest thing that Marx found out? It was the simplest truth. The truth is that before you do many big things, politics, religion, artistic creation, and all that, first we should eat, drink, we should have shelter, we should wear clothes. These are the basic minimum needs. It is after fulfilling that we may involve in many other acts. And this basic thing becomes the foundation for all other things, social, political, cultural, religious institutions and their corresponding ideas and ideologies, which we call as superstructure. So here he is telling that true, the base you have to understand the base in order to understand the superstructure. But I also told you that when he says that mode of production is the base, it doesn't mean that the base is everything. Once superstructure forms, that actually becomes autonomous enough to interact with the base, either to strengthen the base or even to change the base. So it is in that sense, though mode of production is the base, no doubt about it. It is the foundation. Foundation is not everything. Superstructure is equally important. So when Engels saw many people distorting Marxism by emphasizing only economic aspects, this is what Engels told in his letter to his friend J. Bloch on 21st September 1890, almost 7 years after Marx's death. He says, according to the materialist conception of history, the ultimate determining element in human history is the production and reproduction of life. More than this, neither Marx and I have ever asserted. Hence, if somebody twists this into saying that the economic element is the only determining one, he transforms that proposition into a meaningless, abstract, and senseless phrase. See, this itself explains all the critics who say that Marxism only emphasizes on economics. Is telling we spoke about economics because that is the most neglected aspect. People did not concentrate on that, so we emphasized on that. But that doesn't mean that other aspects of life doesn't impact. So if you are saying religion, politics and others, culture, they don't make any impact on human history, then that is wrong. That is what Engels himself is making it clear in this passage. Now another thing, this is a very interesting thing. This was too long back, which I should emphasize. You know, Marxism developed while interacting with two dominant philosophical thoughts of that time. One, fighting against Hegelian idealism, and the other is fighting against mechanical materialism propounded by Feuerbach. So the historical materialism has to, while propounding historical materialist thought, he has to confront both. You know, Hegel looked at history as advancement of spirit or Geist or idea. So it is something that all that we do as human beings is to become part of that universal idea, which is showing us the way as to how we need to move. As against that kind of idealistic notion of abstract notion of history. Marx and Engels, even before they wrote a Communist Manifesto, in a book called The Holy Family, they write this. They say, history does nothing. It possesses no immense wealth. It wages no battles. It is man, real living man, who does all that, who possesses and fights. History is not, as it were, a person apart, using man as a means to achieve its own aims. History is nothing but the activity of man pursuing his aims. If you understand this, you also understand that Marx did not say that history, there is something called history, which is independent of the human beings. At best, we only become a party to that project of history determined by some external forces. It's not so. What all we say history, that's a human history. There is no history beyond the human history. And how is it influenced? The human history is built by the human beings themselves. It is the human beings while pursuing their own aims. They build history. That is what he's trying to say in this passage, and the same thing you also find in another mature work of Engels. It's Ludwig Feuerbach and End of Classical German Philosophy. Here he says, men make their own history. Whatever its outcome may be, in that each person follows his own consciously desired end. And it is precisely the resultant of these many wills operating in different directions and of their manifold effects upon the outer world that constitutes history. So here, history, he says, it doesn't take place independent of human interests or human involvement. There are different kinds of sections among the human beings. Each one in his own personal or group interests, they are working. And maybe that it is at times clashing with one another. And the sum total of all these actions of different groups of people pursuing their own interests That is what the manifold effects of all that, that is what creates history. That is what is. So it is in that sense, never think that history means just mode of production or forces of production, base and superstructure automatically interacting with one another and creating a history. Yes, they're all important, but they all make sense only when you understand it in relation to human interests and human involvement. This is all that history, all that change that you see in society. This is affected through human praxis. That is what Marx tells in his concise 11 thesis on Feuerbach. So I bring to your notice 3 important theses on Feuerbach, which also shows what creates history. The third thesis on Feuerbach says, the materialist doctrine concerning the changing of circumstances and upbringing forgets that circumstances are changed by men and that it is essential to educate the educator himself. What is this one telling? You know, Marx is not the first materialist thinker. Even before Marx there were many, and during his own time there was Feuerbach, a great materialist thinker. And for that matter, you have studied Robert Owen also, who also say that what men are, whether they are good or bad, it depends on the environment in which they are brought up. So if you change the environment, the people also change. So that kind of humanist interpretations the materialists gave. But here Marx is bringing that, he's making that problematic and explaining something more than that. He says that the materialist doctrine which says if you change the conditions and upbringing, then the people also change. That is okay. But who brings that change? Who are the people who are changing the circumstances? That is very important. It is men. It is men or human beings who have to change those circumstances. So it is true, material world is an educator, but that educator himself needs educating. So that change of the material circumstances should be, that responsibility is not taken up by any god or superman. That has to be done by the people themselves. So there is another thesis, eighth thesis on Feuerbach. There it says, all social life is essentially practical. All mysteries which lead theory to mysticism find their rational solution in human practice and in comprehension of this practice. So, there are many things which we do not know in life, but how do we come to know? It is not just by thinking or by reading books, but by acting. It is through our practice that we can change the material world, and in course of time we demystify many things. Many things which appear to be mysteries, they can be shattered when we involve in practice. So it is that practice which creates history. So this practice involves, yes, changing it and understanding how we change that. Then you all might have heard the last thesis, 11th thesis on Feuerbach, which says, the philosophers have interpreted the world in various ways. The point is to change it. So, is there dearth of philosophers and political thinkers in the world? From the times of Socrates to the present times, you have so many thinkers who interpreted the world. What is this world? Why this world? What it should be, and all that. But most important is to change it. And it is not something which philosophers alone do that. No, the entire, all human beings are involved. It is they who change it. Now I come to the last quotation, which is necessary for us to understand. So at one level, I am telling you that human role or human praxis is very crucial for development of history. But we should not romanticize as if human beings can do anything and everything. There is a limitation. The material conditions itself limits to some extent what human beings can or cannot do at a particular point of time in history. So to substantiate, I will read out this passage from Marx's work, The 18 Brumaire of Louis Bonaparte, where he says, men make their own history, but they do not make it as they please. They do not make it under self-selected circumstances, but under circumstances existing already, given and transmitted from the past. The first part you already understood. Men make their own history. Fine. But can you make the way that you please? No. Can you choose the circumstances where you have to bring change? No. Actually, when we bring about change, the human beings are involved in creating history, we should know that they work under circumstances existing already, given and transmitted from the past. We are working under certain circumstances, under certain material condition, which is given to us from our predecessors. We are acting on that and bringing about a change. And we are not acting in abstraction. So we can bring about only that change which is possible, which is in accordance with the material laws. That is what Marx says. And when he's saying, he's also in a way perhaps talking about all that great philosophers who really aspire to bring change, but without understanding the context in which they were proposing the change. For example, when we read early socialist thinkers like Fourier, who thought that he will be able to demonstrate to the whole world if somebody finances him to implement his project. So he wanted to create some kind of a communist society, which he called as phalanstery. Right in the, you can say, the in 19th century beginning itself. He wanted to change the entire society and bring some kind of communism right there. No, you cannot. So also earlier we had a great philosopher, Socrates, idealist philosopher. You see his theory of philosopher king, beautiful, perfect in all respects. But can you create it? No. Why? The material circumstances will not allow it. So also, right at the moment, can you create a higher stage of communism? You cannot. There is a process. And that is what we need to understand. We can create, men can create what is possible under the given circumstances. But ultimately, it is only men who can create. And this is all I would say about Marxist theory of history or historical materialism. Before I leave, I suggest that you go through some of these works. I'm not sure whether it's available now or not. So there was a time when Soviet Union was publishing the works of all these classical Marxist thinkers. There was a volume of Marx, Engels and Lenin on historical materialism. It's titled Historical Materialism, a Collection. In case you find that book, you can see where you will find many of the things which I discussed here. And sometimes it's very difficult to understand for beginners the works of Marx, Engels or Lenin, which are scattered in different works. So for me, to start with, I suggest you read J.V. Stalin's Dialectical and Historical Materialism. So, wherein he explains in simple terms the essence of Marx's conception of history. So, there may be certain contentious aspects in this work. Still, I suggest that it's a good piece of work for the beginners who want to understand Marx's philosophy. And of course, we also have scholars like Maurice Comfort's Historical Materialism. He wrote a beautiful book on dialectical materialism and also historical materialism, and that also explains in a very simple way many aspects related to historical materialism. In case of India, I learned from an Indian Marxist thinker named Shivdas Ghosh. So he also has a very interesting work, and he has that ability to communicate to the masses. So there was a lecture which I came across when I was a student. The lecture was titled Marxism and Development of Human Society. So they have their, I am giving you the URL also, you can look at that. That also explains in very simple terms the essence of development of human society, wherein he discusses even the role of religion in society and all that. So you may start with some of these things. I am not saying that they are the only works, but to start, you can start with these works if you are interested to understand more about Marx's conception of history. I stop here and thank you very much. We'll meet again with a new topic. Bye.